Hello and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation's program Mindfulness Mondays. My name is Crista Ellis and I am the Community Program Manager for Florida and Gulf Coast chapters. I'd like to take a moment, if you're not already, and ask you to join us on camera and wave hello to everyone sharing this time with us today. You can choose to scroll through on your screen and just give a wave to everyone and a smile, say hello, and see your Parkinson's community during this time. Hi, everyone. So good to see you all. So many of you are joining us on camera today, and I want to thank you for those of you who are joining us and are not able to join on camera. A few items to note before we get started. All our meeting attendees have been placed on mute during the presentation portion of the program. This will help reduce background noise and echo and provide you with the best sound quality from our speaker. As a reminder, your questions can be submitted through the chat function in the black banner on the bottom of your viewing page. We will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can during the Q&A portion of this program. For optimal viewing, you can look to the top of your screen and you will see viewing options. Click on the down arrow and choose side-by-side mode. Once there, come to the top right-hand corner and choose speaker view to see our speaker during her presentation. During this time of social distancing, we hope that you are able to stay healthy and safe at home. Due to the evolving situation around the COVID-19 outbreak, we are taking every precaution to look after our community. In our efforts to help you stay connected, the Parkinson Foundation is providing weekly educational and wellness programs in a virtual format through our PD Health at Home series. Each Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have a live expert sharing their tips and knowledge on staying mindful during this unique time. Every week, we will explore a different topic of how the practice of mindfulness can influence your health and well-being. The Parkinson's Foundation is dedicated to engaging and empowering the Parkinson's community. I am pleased to be able to share this time during our Mindfulness Monday event with you. Mark your calendar and join us next Monday as we dive deeper into the practice of mindfulness and its benefits as we cope with the challenge of physical distancing. To learn more and to register for individual events, visit parkinson.org/PDHealth. This is new for all of us, so we thank you in advance for your patience while we're getting used to doing things a new way. Today's session will be recorded and archived on the Parkinson's Foundation website at parkinson.org/PDHealth. Before I introduce today's speaker, I'd like to take a little time to share with you more about the Parkinson's Foundation mission and resources. The Parkinson's Foundation makes life better for people living with Parkinson's disease by improving care and advancing research toward a cure. In everything we do, we build on the energy, experience, and passion of our global Parkinson's community. We provide families with resources, including our website, parkinson.org, educational books, webinars, podcasts, a hospitalization kit, and our toll-free helpline, 1-800-4-PD-INFO, which is staffed by Parkinson specialists. To learn more about our resources and our upcoming virtual events, remember to visit our website at parkinson.org or call our helpline at 1-800-4-PD-INFO. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker who will address communicating with ourselves and loved ones mindfully during this challenging time. Dr. Taylor Rush is a clinical psychologist with specialty training in health psychology at Cleveland Clinic Center for Neurological Restoration. Dr. Rush, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Crista, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me here today. I am so excited to be able to speak to everyone about a topic that I am especially passionate about, which is mindfulness. I think it's wonderful how the PD Foundation is creating these events for folks to be able to better understand mindfulness and how to use it in their everyday lives, and to help enhance the quality of everyone's lives right now, because this is an especially challenging time for us all. So again, thank you for having me here today. So as Crista had mentioned, I am a clinical health psychologist, and I work at the Cleveland Clinic. And a large part of the patients that I see are those who have Parkinson's. And I have been training in mindfulness for the past 12 years now. I started this when I was in grad school, and I'll admit, when I came across it, I didn't know a whole lot about it, and I was slightly skeptical about the whole concept, because everything in my life had been about doing, and getting on to the next step and having to think ahead. And then when my research advisor had said, hey, we're going to start doing some new interventions for our health and wellness lab on mindfulness, and I'm like, I'm not entirely sure about this. But, you know, as a dutiful research assistant, I did what I could to get started, and I started to do some trainings at Duke. And it was through that process that I started to realize that mindfulness was not only something that I could use to help enhance people's health outcomes in our research studies, but also something that I was using in my everyday life to help enhance my well-being and how I handled stress. And so it's really become quite an integral part of my practice, both professionally as well as personally. So I am delighted at any and every opportunity that I get to talk about this. So today we're going to be exploring how to mindfully communicate. This is, I think, one of the more challenging ways in which to sometimes apply mindfulness, because it doesn't just involve ourselves, but those around us, people that we like, and sometimes people that we don't always like. And so, so I wanted to be able to share some of what I've learned about communicating mindfully. So next slide. There we go. Okay. So some of you may have seen this picture or a picture similar to it, and I think it just so perfectly sums up what mindfulness is. So as you can see, the human walking the horse has a mind full of stuff. And I'll admit, you know, at baseline, that is kind of what my brain looks like too. Now, I have kids, I have a husband, I have a job, I have friends, I have family, and we all have these things that we're thinking about on a constant basis, and what's going to happen next. And you're worried about things, and you're concerned about the future, and you're thinking about, you know, your health and the well-being of others. And, you know, so we all have these brains that are so wonderfully gifted at thinking ahead and planning, but then we also don't always spend time actually enjoying what's around us. And so then you have the horse here who is just enjoying that moment. It's with its owner, it's enjoying a landscape, and it's there. And so in that way, I think that we can sometimes learn from the animal kingdom that, you know, the simple joys are often the ones that are the best. And so when we think about mindfulness, for those of you who have attended some of these webinars already, you've probably have a good understanding and the concept of mindfulness. But for those that haven't, you know, mindfulness, how I describe it is it's a mindset. It's an attitude. It's a way in which we view the world and filter information. And at its core, it's just paying attention in the present moment without judgment. And I think for most folks, it's that last part that's the hardest, because we judge everything, whether we recognize it or not. Something is good, something is bad, something is early, something is late, something is, you know, is stressful or it's helpful. We're constantly making evaluative statements about our surroundings, about our behaviors, about what's going on with others. And we don't always recognize it until we start paying attention in the present moment, and we see how much that judgment can sometimes seep in. And so mindfulness is truly about just being with that moment, and whatever comes is what's there, whether it is good, bad, or ugly. We just welcome it for what it is. All right, next slide. Okay, so I want to start off by asking, why is communication important? And this may seem like an obvious question, but how people perceive communication and why we communicate can vary depending on who you ask. And so I want to welcome you to answer this question in the chat if you would like. So why is communication important? Oh, here we go. Okay. So people are saying to express thoughts, to give and receive information, to learn. Absolutely. We can understand ourselves and others, connecting with others. It's important for personal interactions. I know, mind reader. To better understand, express emotion. The foundation of our relationship with others. Absolutely. Listen, learn to let others know what we think and feel and learn from them. So we have a few listen and learns. Okay, help others know who we are. So communication is part of expression. So others can better understand our point of view, who we are, what our opinions are, what we need. But then I also hear people going on the other side saying it's also a way to listen and understand others. So as we can see, overcome daily issues and important relationships. Absolutely. Okay. And that you guys are right on par. So we have, a little bit of, on the giving and the receiving side of things, so communication is the bedrock of having a healthy relationship. We need to be able to communicate to connect with others, to resolve conflict. We have to be able to communicate our needs if we have them, validate our own emotions, express our experiences. And, I think communication becomes, it's how we navigate in society. Oh, yep, you guys keep going on me. You guys are great. So communication, I think, and what I found with working with those who have Parkinson's is that it's very important when you have a chronic health issue to be able to communicate effectively. And I mean that in terms of your relationship with your healthcare providers, your family, your friends, others that you may interact with, in order to navigate, having a chronic health issue successfully. It's not easy, and it requires sometimes for us to be a bit more communicative than maybe we ever have been in the past. All right, next slide. Okay, so now we have a polling question. So what makes for good communication? If you had to pick, yeah, okay, so we got listening, sharing, speaking, understanding, or all of the above. All of the above is in a commanding lead. Definitely listening, sharing, understanding. Everyone's got a vote, that's for sure. All of the above. All right. So all of the above came away with 90% of the vote for the poll. And you guys are absolutely correct. So it's, in order to have good communication, we need to be able to, oops, let's get out of there. We need to be able to listen, and we'll talk about what listening means, because I think sometimes listening has a different definition depending on who you ask. Good communication requires sharing and speaking, being able to talk about your own opinions, being able to understand both your perspective as well as the perspective of others. So definitely these are all aspects of good communication. Now, next slide. Okay. So now, when we think about good communication, as you guys have demonstrated, we understand what usually makes for good communication. We know the key ingredients to this. We know what we need to be able to do. However, we often find ourselves having difficulties in communication, sometimes around certain subjects or sometimes with certain people. And so when we think about the challenges that we may see in effective communication, there's a few things that I want to bring to mind. So one thing that I talk about with folks is that when we are in a state of heightened emotion or in just a heightened physical sensation period, sometimes that's really hard to then communicate with someone effectively. And so when I did a bit more of marriage and family type therapies, when we talk about when is it good to have a productive conversation, we always said to remember HALT. And HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. That if you are any of those four things, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, it is probably not the best time to have a productive conversation. So if I come home after a 10-hour day at work and my 8-year-old comes up to me and says, "Mom, I really want this app," or whatever it is on her agenda that day, she knows that if she bombards me at the door, she's probably not going to get the answer that she wants because I'm usually hungry and tired. And so it's not a good point at which to have a good conversation. And so, timing matters in terms of how we are feeling emotionally. Right now, a lot of people are in a heightened sense of stress. And so there might be times that are better than others in which to communicate things that are important. Next is differing perspectives that are not always understood. So sometimes two people are coming to the table with different perspectives and the other person just doesn't understand where the other one is coming from. And so there's the old story of one person being put at the head of an elephant and the other person being put at the tail. And they are both describing the same animal, the same thing that's right in front of them, but they are disagreeing on what it is that they are seeing and feeling. And so it's important to remember that, if your perspective is very different from another's, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong and they're right or vice versa. It just means that you two are describing different parts of the elephant. And so that often can be a point at which communication stalls. Another piece, and this goes into what we'll talk about with mindfulness, is reaction versus response. And oftentimes, our first reaction in a situation isn't necessarily our best reaction or the most helpful reaction in that situation. So, an example, if I get an email and it's something that provokes a strong emotion in me, and what I want to do is just fire an email back immediately, telling them exactly what I think of their email, that may not be in my best interest, especially if it's, at work or somewhere where, that could have consequence. And, it would be important to be able to take a step back and say, okay, my first reaction might be frustration. It might be, anxiety. It might be stress. And so it might be good to take a few moments and actually think about what it is that I want to say. So we talk about knee-jerk reaction being usually our first reaction versus response, which is something that's a bit more thoughtfully, processed. Next is the writing reflex. And this is something that we all do. I definitely find myself guilty of this. And that is, you want to, if you hear something that someone says that you don't like or you don't agree with, even if they're not done with their statement, you're already forming your rebuttal. You're already thinking about, no, what they said is wrong, and I need to tell them it's wrong because they need to understand that. So a lot of times that writing reflex can stall out effective communication, because then we just try to defend our perspective, and the defenses don't necessarily lead to a great outcome. And then last is distractions. And this comes up a lot, especially now. We have usually at least 10 distractions right in front of us, from being able to communicate effectively. We have phones, we have TV, we have tablets, we have computers, we have, the sound of the neighbors, we have, the dogs, going after a toy. There are always distractions that could sometimes pull us away from being able to effectively stay in a conversation. And something that I find in when I'm working with my folks who have Parkinson's is that sometimes physical sensations can really make it difficult to concentrate. People have tremor, people have rigidity, they have dyskinesia, they have wearing off. And so in some of those moments when their symptoms are more heightened, it may be really, really difficult for them to have a productive conversation because they can't fully focus on what's right in front of them. All right, next slide. Okay, so mindless communication is kind of what we were talking about in terms of, both the challenges in effective communication and sometimes what the missing parts are in good communication. And that's basically when people talk and there's no listening involved. It's a one-way track. We mindlessly say whatever it is that we think that we want to say and the point that we want to get across, but it's not always listening to others' perspectives or what they have to say or how their opinion may differ or even be the same, and we don't recognize it. And so when we're shifting from mindless to mindful communication, we have to shift from a me first perspective to more of a we first perspective, in that you're thinking about the entirety of the communication, not just the points that you may wish to get across. Okay, next slide. So the key points with mindful communication is, there we go, is one, being all in the conversation. And what I mean by that is being fully there with an open mind, open heart, and an aware and awake body. So that, you're not, distracted by the emails that are coming on your phone. You're not thinking about, okay, I have to make sure I get the roast in for dinner. You're thinking about what that person is saying right in front of you. And so being all there, all in for the entirety of the conversation. And, setting your intention for the interaction. So especially if it might be a conversation that you've been wanting to have with someone, or something that may provoke some heightened emotions, setting your intention for what it is that you want to say and what are your expectations for that conversation. And, sometimes if we think, gosh, I got to talk to so-and-so about this thing that I know is going to make them upset, we automatically assume what we think the person's response is going to be. And oftentimes I say, you'll steer in the direction that you're looking. So if you've ever been driving and you see a house or a yard that catches your eye, and then you start looking at it, you notice the car starts steering that way. Our expectations do the same thing. And so sometimes the conversation leads where we think it might lead just because we expect it to go there. And so if you want your intention to be for a healthy conversation, a conversation where both parties get to talk, you're much more likely to get there. And then listening with full attention. And I think that this is so important with mindfulness because, again, being aware in the present moment without judgment means that you're listening without thinking about your rebuttal, without thinking about what you're going to say in response to half the statement that the other person has already started. And being able to just be with their words until they're done. And that honestly is a lot easier said than done. And I've worked through that process with people on many occasions, and they think that it's going to be easy. But in fact, when you just try to fully listen, it can come with its own challenges. And then lastly, focusing on what matters. What is truly important for the end of this conversation? Is it having your voice heard? Is it that you want to be able to join with that person and understand each other? Is it that you want to make sure that the other person knows that you are genuinely listening to what their concerns are? Think about what matters for that particular conversation, because again, you'll steer in the direction that you're looking. Okay, next slide. So there has actually been some good research on the benefits of mindful communication, and I won't get into too many of the sciencey details of the research methodology or anything like that, but basically with some of the research that has been done, we found some really good benefit with mindful communication. It enhances our quality and satisfaction with relationships, so people feel more connected to those that they love. There's better conflict resolution so that things actually resolve instead of, you just kind of bring it up, but then it goes back under the surface and then it just comes back up later, that we can actually come to a sense where both parties feel like they are able to hear each other's opinions and come to a good mediation. It improves emotional resilience. So meaning, there might be situations where someone emotionally hurts you or you hurt them, and you're able to mend the relationship. You're able to come back from strong emotion and come to a sense of well-being afterward. And then lastly, and this is one that's been looked at a lot, is greater self-awareness. So people feel like they are able to better understand how they are provoked by what other people say. They're better able to understand why they may react so strongly to certain topics or certain people. And so that way they don't feel like they get overridden by their own emotions. They're able to keep that in check and stay on track with conversations to a productive end so that they don't get caught in the weeds. All right, next slide. So if anyone is interested in reading a book about mindful communication, this graphic on here is a book that I would highly recommend. So this is The 5 Keys to Mindful Communication, and it's by Susan Gillis Chapman. She's a marriage and family therapist who has a significant background in mindfulness and the westernization of Eastern philosophies. And she talks about a lot of good examples and a lot of good techniques for mindfully communicating. And so I just wanted to highlight a few of them. So the first one is silence, and knowing the power of silence. And being able to create some space between listening to someone and then responding. And I think it's something that would come up a lot when I was in training, is that my supervisors would say, know the power of pause. Understand that sometimes, to react quickly is not always the best. And so being able to actually allow ourselves a little silence between listening and responding can change the course of a conversation, because again, it helps you not indulge in that knee-jerk reaction, which is often maybe strong and perhaps not always the best thing to say. And so we can check our own emotional reactions and then kind of reconnect with ourselves in the present moment, because we may notice that our shoulders are starting to rise and we're getting tense and that our mind is racing. And so give yourself a moment to be able to think, recenter, and then come back to the conversation with what your response is. I think a lot of times, especially in our society, we think of silence as bad or awkward or something that we should fill. And that may not always be the case. And what I found is that once I learned how to use silence when talking with people, I end up getting a lot more information that can be helpful for the conversation. The next is mirroring. And so mirroring includes what we call reflective listening. And if you guys have heard of this, then great, you're already a step ahead. But reflective listening is when you truly you listen to what the other person has to say, and then you repeat it back in a summative form. So it might be that someone's talking about, a vacation that they're hoping to plan one day once all this stuff is over, and so they kind of go on for several paragraphs worth of sentences about it. And so you could show that you were listening by saying, wow, so it sounds like you are really looking forward to getting back to travel after this is all over, and being able to experience other things in the world again. That is reflective listening. And so being able to do that before launching into whatever your response may be, because someone else's response more naturally might be, oh yeah, me too, I really want to go on this cruise, or I want to go here, I want to do that, and so we launch into our own perspective, which is just natural because that's the perspective we're coming from. But it can really help enhance relationships to first mirror what you hear the person say. And it also shows that you are listening to their emotions, that you are thinking about the situation that they're describing, and it helps them to understand that they're being heard. And so oftentimes when people find themselves talking about situations that are difficult or emotions that are difficult, I often will encourage them to mirror whatever that person is saying first before launching into their response or rebuttal or whatever is on their mind. Third is encouraging. And so in the book, she calls it going for the gold. And it's basically trying to, find the best in others, even when it's really hard to like that person at the time. They might have some derogatory messages that they're sending. They might have some aggressive tendencies. But what you're trying to do is look for a silver lining somewhere, looking for an attribute that helps you to understand that person and where they may be coming from. Next is discerning, and that is when is it appropriate to move forward with a conversation versus when should we stop? And so again, like with my daughter, when I come home from work and she does not ask me for that new app that she wants for her phone, she can say, okay, I know that mom just got home and she's probably tired and hungry, so I'm not going to do that right now. So, sometimes we have to learn how to read a person and to read a room as to whether or not it may be a good time to have a conversation, because, it's not always a good time. And then it's also important to discern what we're feeling and how we may be responding in a situation. And so are we responding in a way that is going to help produce a good outcome, or are we responding in a strong but negative way that may lead to us getting stuck or escalating to an argument? And so sometimes we need to know when we have to be, give ourselves a timeout. And then responding kind of goes along with discerning, is that, it's important to ask yourself, okay, in my response, is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? And this is my favorite, is, does it improve the silence? Is this, a response that will help enhance the conversation, that will enhance the connection you have with this person? Or is it truly saying something that might be hurtful because you want them to feel how you feel? Is it retaliatory? Is it a generalized statement that may actually be unfair and provoke your defense and their defense? And so, it's important to respond in a way where you can say yes to hopefully at least one of those things. Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? And does it improve the silence? You need a yes to at least one of those. If you don't have a yes, we go back to silence. Okay, so next slide, which I believe is a poll question. So what is the most difficult for you to talk about and communicate well? So feelings or emotions, advocacy with needs and wants. Is it difficult to communicate differences of opinion? And then something that I see, especially with my folks who have Parkinson's, is talking about the future and some of the ambiguity that's associated with that. And they don't necessarily always want to have those conversations, or their family members don't always want to have those conversations. Let's see here. Okay, well, that was a good mix across the board here, so this is good. So we have feelings and emotions at 23%, needs and wants at 30%, differences of opinion had won out with 50%, and planning for the future at 20%. Okay. Okay, next slide. Okay, so applying mindful communication during challenging times. So again, this is a challenging time right now. A lot of people are home with their loved ones and sometimes alone a lot more than they're normally used to. And for some, they're like, I'm actually not going out any more often than I normally would, but I don't like being told that it's not a choice anymore. Like I've multiple introvert friends who said, I used to just really like staying at home, and now that I have to, I don't want to do it. And so, this is a difficult situation for us all. And it's challenging. Stress runs high, patience runs low. It can be easy to go on autopilot in this context. When we are stressed, we tend not to be very mindful. We tend to kind of go into autopilot as a way to conserve our own energy. And we also may notice that we're more irritable. Small things may easily annoy us. And so it's important to kind of check in with your emotions. Check in several times throughout the day and say, how am I feeling right now? Am I being choppy with anyone? Am I noticing that it's hard for me to demonstrate patience to myself or others? What are you experiencing? And then when it comes to needing to talk to someone about something, and maybe it's something like, I really don't like how you load the dishwasher, or you never put anything back where you're supposed to. You have some of these smaller things that may come into play, or sometimes larger issues may come out more in the context of being around each other more. And so you have to think about, what is it that we are really fighting about here? And what is it that I want to say about it? What is most important, again? And what are these things that keep cropping up? And what are the themes to this over and over again? Now, on the listening end, again, sometimes, so we have to listen, and to mindfully listen, again, you are all in and you're thinking about this. And sometimes we have to listen even when it's difficult to hear. And we may have to engage in perspective taking and think about, what is it like in the other person's shoes? Are they truly just being a jerk? Often not. Most people have a pretty good reason for the reasons they act. And they may not always be readily apparent, but they are valid. And so we really have to work hard to better understand their perspective, what they're responding to, and why they may feel the way that they do. And trying to find at least one way that you can agree with them on something. That is usually the foot in the door to being able to productively and mindfully communicate with someone, is being able to find one similarity. All right, next slide. So we talk about, again, ways to do this in a compassionate and mindful way. And one is, avoid personalizing whatever your first response is to what that person says. Usually best to start with a reflective statement of what the other person said, and then saying something that starts with I. It's usually not best to start with you. Well, if you didn't do this, or if you would just do this, then we wouldn't be in this situation. That finger pointing often just escalates and makes things worse. And so we need to think about, okay, what do I feel? What do I think? What do I believe? And don't turn it into a you statement by saying, I think you are doing this. So you need to think about how to advocate for yourself and your perspective in a way that doesn't necessarily persecute the other person. Again, timing matters. It's important to recognize when a good time is to have a conversation, and when maybe you guys need to go to separate corners or not engage. Again, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and we could probably add a few more to that. And remember that you're only in control of yourself and your own responses. You can't say things or do things and expect it to change or amend what that other person may say. What they say is what they say, but how you respond to it is up to you. And then remembering that at the end of that conversation, and even if it doesn't always end well, it's not win-lose. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just where you end it for now. And it doesn't define who you are as a person. It doesn't define your character or the other person's character. It just means that it may take a few iterations to get through a particular topic or conversation. So again, at the end, we need to think about we first, not me first. Okay, next slide. Then mindful communication, I always say, starts from within. It starts with us being able to cultivate a sense of self-compassion. Understand yourself and why you may strongly react to some things and not others. You know, what are your own beliefs and values that may be provoked in some of these conversations? Might you be overly harsh with yourself or your standards? You know, should statements are often a sign of that. You know, I should be doing this, they should be doing that. Shoulds are oftentimes unrealistic standards that don't actually pull through, you know, that aren't realistic. And listen to your emotions and what they're telling you. Sometimes they're telling you something that's very important. Sometimes we need to open an ear to our own emotions and listen to our body, you know, how it may tense up during certain conversations or when certain people are around, and what does that tell us? And think about what your needs are and if they're being met, because oftentimes resentment, stress, anxiety can come from unmet needs. And what may you need to advocate for more actively, and who needs to be a part of that effort so that you know who to turn to. Right, next slide. So we are going to do a brief loving kindness meditation. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, loving kindness meditation is a practice where you are cultivating compassion towards yourself as well as others. And it's been found, actually, there have been parallel practices of this in various religions, in Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism, even in Christianity, for how we, think about, expanding our love and kindness towards others. And what we found is, even in some research on brain imaging, is that it seems to strengthen the part of the brain that lights up when we are being empathic and thinking about others. That area lights up stronger in those who practice loving kindness meditation. And it helps us to be a bit more mindful with our words and actions and find those slivers of commonality with others that we may find difficult. And next slide. Yep, there we go. So some things that it's basically kind of like a mantra meditation where you are repeating simple phrases over and over towards the self as well as others. And so some examples are, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be at peace. So these are wishes that you would have for yourself and others that cultivate a sense of compassion, acceptance, love, kindness. And so I would encourage you to think about your own phrases that you might be able to say for yourself, because not all of these may resonate with you or apply to you. And so on the next slide, I think we had a question about, what are some phrases that you may want to use? And so if you would like to share them, great. If not, we can jump into the next part, but know that, there are some phrases that you might want to use that might be helpful to others as they are figuring out their own phrases. That would be wonderful for everyone to have to share. But I will walk you through a brief loving kindness meditation that we can do. And so you'll get to hear my phrases for this one. So we'll go, let's see. Oh, peace within and surrounds me. That's a good one. Thank you, Krista. Okay, energetic, yes. All right, so in the interest of time, we'll go to the next slide. And so we'll do a few minutes of a loving kindness meditation practice. And there are many that you can find on the internet, on YouTube, on different relaxation apps. So certainly if there are any that resonate with you, please feel free to use them. And I'll be doing one today that I have really enjoyed in the past. So go ahead and get as comfortable as you can, seated. If you're lying down, whatever is most comfortable for you. And for some people, they may feel more comfortable with their eyes closed. For some, they just kind of find a fixed point a few feet in front of them where they can just soften their gaze. And I just want you to be aware of your body and its position. And so turning inward and being able to think about how your body feels. And again, trying to remove the judgment from it, just noticing if you feel relaxed, if you feel tense, if you feel wary because you're not sure what this will look like. Just bringing an attitude of openness and gentleness. And just focusing your attention on the breath. Noticing the breath as you inhale and exhale. Just finding the rhythm of your breath, not necessarily changing it, but just noticing and letting that be your anchor for this practice. And in your mind's eye, I want you to think of someone that you have cared for very deeply and who cares for you. And it may be someone that is with you in your present life, or it may be someone from the past, possibly someone who's no longer with us. I just want you to envision that person behind you over your right shoulder. And thinking about how that person has cared for you and the love that they have showed you. Just imagine that you can feel that love over your body. Their kindness, their generosity, all towards you because you matter. And as you can feel that love fill your heart, that same love that you probably feel for them, imagine that you can direct it inward towards yourself because you deserve it too. And silently saying to yourself, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be at peace. And even if it's difficult to imagine giving yourself those feelings, just setting the intention that you deserve it. May I be happy, may I be well, may I be at peace. And now imagine either that same person who is on your right, or perhaps a different person that you care deeply for. Imagine them on your left. Again, this could be a person who is in your life currently or in the past, someone that you have cared for very deeply. And imagining that you can then send this same love, this same care, this same well wishes to them. Again, being able to say to yourself, may they be happy, may they be well, may they be at peace. Checking in with your breath, again, allowing it to anchor you to the here and now in case the mind starts to drift, which it inevitably does. May they be happy, may they be well, may they be at peace. And given the current state of the world, those feelings of love and kindness and generosity need to be as widespread as possible across all humans everywhere. And taking a moment to think about how we are all connected right now. By tragic circumstances, unfortunately, but connected nonetheless. And how we all just wish for peace. And ultimately, we all just wish for happiness. That if nothing else, regardless of values, customs, beliefs, that ties us together. And so thinking about that interconnectedness of all the human race and even all beings outside of that in the animal kingdom, and thinking about these same feelings for everyone. May we be happy. May we be well. May we be at peace. As again, it's all something that every being deserves. Something that all of us want. Thinking about what an amazing place the world would be if we could all show this kindness to one another on a more regular basis. May we be happy. May we be well. May we be at peace. And now taking one or two big deep breaths. Bringing yourself back present to the here and now. Wiggling fingers and toes. Enlivening your muscles. And breaking that gaze or opening your eyes when you're ready. And there is a new polling question as you reflect on this practice. How are you feeling? Okay. So vast majorities, 80% say that they feel relaxed or calm. Some do feel a little sleepy, which is normal. And sometimes that's our body trying to tell us something. Some say that they feel invigorated, which is actually a side effect of mindfulness. A lot of people don't realize that sometimes it makes us feel more alive. And then some feel a little anxious or restless, which again is not at all abnormal. It's something that we all experience, especially when we're told to stay in the moment. So great job, everyone. Okay, So this is, I think, just an ending slide with my information. I am here for questions or thoughts as we, wrap things up in the next 5-10 minutes. I'm more than happy to answer any questions people have, but thank you so, so much for allowing me to be here today. You guys are a great group.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reshbeta. That was quite invigorating. I really appreciate your guidance and your support for today's meditation. So if we could all give her a virtual round of applause. Yes. For the sake of time, we do have quite a few questions to address. The first one, mindfulness experts talk about living in the present moment while avoiding overthinking, regrets over past actions and relationship issues. How do we do this? So not overthink regrets from the past, but living in the present. How do we accomplish this?
I think that's that's a task that often takes some time. So one thing that I always tell people is that when you are thinking about things that have happened in the past, which none of us have the time machine to go back and amend or change, we have to recognize, okay, sometimes things happen that maybe we do regret, that maybe wasn't in our best interest or in the interest of others. And honestly, part of that is just being human. We all make mistakes, and I think it's important to recognize that no one's going to skate through this life having not made mistakes. And secondly, I think that's where the self-compassion really comes in, is that we have to come to a sense of, okay, I'm human, I made mistakes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not deserving of love. It doesn't mean that I'm not deserving of peace. It just means that I have to be able to come to peace with whatever happened in the past and be able to let go. It doesn't mean that you ignored that it happened. It doesn't mean that it's just you let yourself or someone else off the hook, but ultimately coming to a sense of acceptance that, okay, that happened, but it doesn't have to define me forevermore. And it's something that I can let go of. And sometimes it takes a while to do that. And sometimes it takes, talking to someone about it and being able to recognize that those things don't have to stay buried in the dark. Often when they come to light, they end up withering quite a bit. And so don't let your voice not be heard.
Thank you. Last question for the sake of time. I often think that I have to win for the conversation to be successful. What can I do to be more mindful?
I think it's important to think about what your definition of winning means. If it means that your point is heard and that everyone agrees with you, yeah, that can sometimes not always lead to the best resolution depending on the circumstance. And so I think it's important to recognize, what does winning actually mean versus how have I been taught what winning means? And sometimes those are two very different things. And think about, how has quote unquote winning actually helped me versus how may have it affected my relationships in a not so helpful way. And so, thinking about what is your ultimate goal with some of those conversations with winning versus both people feeling like they win, because that is usually my goal, is to make sure everyone wins, because usually there's a way of doing that in most conversations where everyone can feel heard. And so sometimes you have to introspect a bit about why is that winning so important, and how do I need to address that, maybe in a way that doesn't necessarily mean I win every argument. And if you feel that knee-jerk reaction kicking in, that's probably a good time to take a few of those deep breaths and step back so that righting reflex doesn't necessarily halt the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Resch. A huge thank you for you joining us today, sharing your knowledge and wisdom with all of us. We really appreciate your time. I'd like to invite you all to join us this Saturday for our virtual moving day, Saturday, May 9th. You can learn more and register at movingdaywalk.org. I'd also like to share with you all, if you are finding our Mindfulness Mondays helpful, informative during these trying times, you can join us tomorrow for our kickoff of our podcast series on mindfulness. We'll be featuring Jordan Steinberg from the Barrow Neurological Institute. You can register, download the podcast at parkinson.org/podcast. And lastly, if you haven't already and you are not on camera, I would love for you all to join us on camera to see your Parkinson's community, scroll through, see the beautiful faces here on camera, say and wave goodbye to your Parkinson's community across the nation. We really appreciate you all being here, connecting, continuing to learn about different ways to cope during these trying times, and give yourself some loving kindness during the times of COVID, and know that what you are doing is the best that you can, and that you continue to grow and learn more, especially through this journey of mindfulness with us at the Parkinson's Foundation. One last final applause for Dr. Taylor Rush of Cleveland Clinic. Yes, virtual round of applause. Thank you so much, so much. We really appreciate you. One final reminder, we've gotten a lot of questions about today's presentation. You can find this presentation on our website at parkinson.org/pdhealth. And we will also be sending a follow-up email that will have a direct link so you can download the recording of today's event and find this loving kindness meditation at your own leisure time. So thank you all for joining us. And Dr. Rush, thank you so much. Goodbye, guys. See you next week.